Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good
Yeah, morning for
evening,
you, afternoon for me, and evening for some other people.
even for some other people. And we also have people watching the replay later.
Oh yeah,
So,
of course.
yeah. If people from different time zones, please let us know where you're watching from. So it's really good to see you, where you are, where you're from.
Yeah.
And today we will be, so welcome to Hello Money Club Weekly Live. Today's topic is extended business hours for more flexibility. It's a topic we've been talking about from a different angle over the last week. Basically, we have been talking about the 4-day work week, as that is a question that we get a lot from our viewers, from our members, from our clients. So we have been talking about how that would work, what are the pros and cons, and if that would be something for companies to move to. So we got a question. I'm just going to move here to this, to our slide here.
Mhm.
So we got a question from one of our guests. I'll just put it here a little bit larger. One of our guests in the show, what's a viewer from the show, she said, what we get is the recurring question of what time of the day to work. And then she gave a little bit more explanation. She said, well, yeah, we're just having these discussions about questions like this. Is it okay to do leisure things in the middle of the day for several hours and then work in the evening instead? She was explaining a little bit more, like, for example, if the weather is nice or you want to do some exercise, then must all days be 8 hours, something we also been talking about a lot. She said maybe it's okay for us, for our employees to work 10 hours a day and 6 hours another day. And this question, this is what we added based on other questions we get from other people. If you
Yeah.
get all work done in 4 days, could you take a day per week off? Which is something that other people would prefer. So it's a fascinating topic, and I'm happy that we're going to be talking about it today a little bit more.
Mm.
So, Trevor, in what way did you get those questions from the people around you and the people from your network?
Yeah, it's sort of implied, I think, a lot of the time when it comes to the people that I talk to, because as soon as they start to think about how can we do work differently, which is often the point at which you or I end up talking to people, is they kind of go, how can we do work differently? And then this just comes up as one of the examples. And, you've mentioned it before, and I know we'll talk a bit about it later. It's almost like the retail model, right? So the longer working hours to accommodate the people. And I think that the fundamental question in there, or the bit that is probably worth putting a pin in a little bit, is it okay? Because it comes across like that. The question often comes across like that. And the answer is yes, of course it's okay. Actually, that's not the question we need to answer. The question we need to answer is, does it work for your organization? And I think that's kind of the angle that we're going to take a lot today, is how could this work? Or, what are the implications of trying to implement something like this, just a longer day, and making that okay?
Yeah, and also would like to ask everybody who is watching this either live or in the replay, do you have flexible hours? Do you have, for example, offer flexibility with certain core hours, which is a model that we see popping up? Does your company really give a lot of flexibility, or is it a straight 8-hour time slot that everybody is working at the same time? Let me, in the meantime, we'll go a little bit to that's what we think is could be the extended hours model. There's different ways. There's not really, I don't think it's really a name for it. People would call it more flexibility. You can also compare it a little bit with retail, which is actually what our viewer did as well. She said it reminded me of the time when I worked in retail, where we just extended our opening hours and we didn't make more money, but we offered more flexibility to our clients. And I can remember that as well, because when I was young and till my 20s, the shops in my village were open from 9 to 5. This is really difficult for people that work, that have office hours at the same times. So retail
Yeah.
wins, got more flexibility.
Yeah.
Currently in the Netherlands, shops will be open from 8 in the morning to 10 in the evening. I'm here in Brazil, that is even more flexible. And I remember that when I was in Mexico years ago, there was like a huge supermarket that was open for 24 hours. So we were just going there like at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Just,
Always good.
so
Yeah, have a
it's always,
supermarket that's
and
open
there was not
24
only
hours.
that, we would be the only one, just browsing around. So if you look at it as extended hours, you could basically say these are the business hours, but we offer more flexibility. So we go instead from 9 to 5, we go from 8 to 6 or from 7 to 7, which gives people more flexibility to work at certain hours in the day, take longer breaks, pick up kids from daycare, do some exercise, or start late if you're a late starter, start early if you're an early starter. So there could be in that extended hours model, there will be an individual work week that could be 40 hours, like the more traditional work week, but you can also say if you prefer to do a 30-hour work week, which is that's at the same time possible. So that doesn't really matter how long the work week is. I think for some people it might be an uneasy feeling, and we go into that a little bit more, Trevor, in a bit, like how would that work? But we shouldn't be forgetting that, like in retail, hospitals, factories, and many more industries, it's been done for many, many years that several people work in different times, doing the same work in the same organization.
Yeah, I guess
And
that's the thing, isn't it? We end up talking a lot to knowledge workers and people in tech and that kind of thing, who are often at the front of trying to do different models. And this is almost like a reverse learning where you're looking at more traditional organizations and then seeing what it is that they have done, but they have got a very clear need to do it that way. This is about now being more employee experience driven.
Yeah, and I think that is a little bit what people are going to be struggling with the idea that it's like, because I say we had a time and presence mindset when it came to office work a lot,
Yeah.
and that has been now a virtual time and presence mindset. So even if people work remotely, that's not that revolutionary if you think about it. If you think that everybody still needs to log in at the same time, sometimes some companies even have applications that track hours that people are actually working.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we are still in that mindset. And as soon as you start to extend the business hours, you are starting to move the foundations of this model.
Exactly.
And I do want to extend also a little bit on this idea that in the Netherlands, where I'm from, we have had this for over 15 years. So there was the new way of working, which was a movement in the Netherlands. It still exists, obviously, but it was at that time very popular 15 to 20 years ago, and a lot of companies moved to this model, offering more flexibility, working where and when you want. So it is a common model, and what you could see is that people would be working for example, like in the morning, they would do some work at home. They would bring their children to school, and they would commute after those hours to the office where they would have meetings and collaboration. They might go home at a regular time, and after dinner, when the children are to bed, they might, check in and work a little bit on the presentation. They also might say, okay, there's like one day a week that I will be working from home. So that flexibility that companies are now moving to around the world, and that's bringing up a lot of issues and question marks. It's actually a model that has been successfully implemented in the Netherlands, in the sense that we don't even think about it anymore. And it's kind of normal to be able to, some people would be working at 7, starting work at 7, showing up in the office, going home at 4, and some people would come in at 9:30. A lot of those companies actually say, well, you can start between 7 and 10, for example.
Right.
And then,
Okay.
you are expected to work like those 8 hours, and sometimes say, you could, of course, but then even, if you do some work from home, you'd still be kind of expected to be in the office around 10-ish, because then, people could have meetings. So, and it's not that,
Right.
And it works quite natural for people. There's a lot of people working from home 1 to maybe 2 or 3, even 3 days a week. Having that flexibility, doing some work in the evening. It's all quite integrated. So, and I don't think there was a lot of big changes needed to make it successfully work, because people kind of started in that context. If the context is quite clear, people starting to make minor changes to the schedule, and then at one point they find where the boundaries are. So
And I guess
think it's quite natural. Yeah.
So, but that was like quite a big culture.
I think I lost your audio. Now it's just me, but. Ooh. Can you hear me, Trevor? That's so strange. We have Can somebody in the comments let us know? So if you're watching, can you let us know in the comments if you can hear Trevor? Let me see if I can open the live stream. I'm just going to open up the live stream here to see if we can hear you. There is a delay, so let me see. Can somebody in the comments let us know? So if you're watching, can you let us know in the comments if you can hear Trevor? I'm just on the live screen now, but I don't think. No, Trevor, it's you. Yeah, Trevor. So we can't hear you on the live stream either. So maybe you can take some time to figure that out, and then I am moving back to the audience here. So is there anybody in this audience? Let us know if you have some flexible hours, if you are working with core hours, people starting at different times of the day, people being able to work from home for a few hours. Just let us know if you have that. Trevor, you're back on. Can you say hi?
Should I say hi and then see if you can hear me?
We can hear you right now. Yeah.
I have no idea what happened there.
No, technology. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but good to have you back, because I was actually just going to ask you, let's look a little bit into the benefits of this
Sure.
model. So I want to compare it like implicitly with the normal 9 to 5 days, but also with the 32-hour 9 to 5 model. So because like if you say more, then you want to know compared to what. Well, I do think the benefit is more flexibility for employees in working in, for example, their biological rhythm, but also the needs of their family, their other projects. So it will allow more flexibility also for people to have, as we say, pick up children from daycare, do some exercise in daytime, take a long lunch, have a nap. That is all very beneficial if you're working from home, especially.
Exactly. I mean, I guess one of the things with the flexibility side is that I, as a working parent myself, in the last jobs that I was employed in, I kind of did a 7 to 7 anyway, but it wasn't very explicit. So it's not just having that flexibility; it's that someone, an organization, a team, a division is just being really explicit that this is flexibility that you have, it is available to you, rather than as a parent kind of working early and late because you feel guilty about the time you take out in the middle of the day to spend time with your kids or drop them off. So it's kind of the flexibility and the permission to be flexible as well, because you might already have the flexibility but not the permission.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that you say that, because you use the word guilt here and the word permission. It's exactly what it is, because in practice, as a parent, and maybe go for other people, employees are taking that space, because it's very difficult with, today we have like often two parents both working and dividing care. And some people might have, do university study next to their day job. So you can see that a lot of people have to, there's also like people want to take care of their elderly parents. There's many reasons that people do not have that, like, straight 8-hour time slot, but need to have their breaks. So people do that. And I have that also with a company that a few years ago that invited me to help them to implement new ways of work, unlimited holidays. And they said, it's what we already do, because we don't track holidays. But on the back office, we have some problem with the accountants, with, bookkeepings, tracking systems. So let's just formalize this into an unlimited policy. And it just gives people that sense of freedom and the fact, okay, it's okay. And that affects well-being, because it is a reality for many people anyway.
Well, I guess on the well-being front, then what you're saying, they're giving permission to, which goes back to one of the questions that we got originally, is can I take an extended break in the day to kind of go and do something else that looks after me? And that is it okay thing. Suddenly the answer is obvious, because your working hours are much longer, but what we're not saying is that you literally work from 7 to 7. So if you decide to take some kind of break during the day, and we know that biologically most people have a slump just after lunch, well, that's in the middle of the working day for a lot of people. So they could be, and we've talked about this before, people kind of designing their own work day. This idea that I want to work when my brain is most attuned to the kind of work that I do. And for some people, that will require focus, and therefore there's a huge chunk in the middle of the day, about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, where you're not actually that great at that kind of work, and the 7 to 7 allows you to make more choices. So it kind of goes back to the flexibility, but also well-being as well.
Yeah, and they're very connected, of course. So they're like intertwined, and it is about people feeling guilty, maybe taking that time off, or manager checking in and said, well, I wanted to talk to you, but you weren't there. What's going on? And as soon as you start to formalize that and say, yes, we are moving to this flexible extended hour model, there will be the discussion will be on another level, and people will feel differently about it. Another benefit that, if you especially compare to going back to 4 days a week, I think the extended hour model will give more accessibility for other people. So basically, the factory is in the factory is working for more hours. So it means that if you have client-facing roles, you will be having a 12-hour time slot a day that your clients can reach your company, instead of an 8-hour time slot a day. And especially if you're thinking about going back to 30-hour work week, it makes more sense to do that in the context of extended business model. Which brings us to the pitfalls, because I'm sure that people now are going to be like, yeah, but how is that going to work in? And so if that's coming up with you right now, just put it in the comments. We are going to address some of them, and I think we hope actually to find a little more risks and concerns and challenges that people think are going to be see on the horizon, or for their specific company. Because if you put them in the comments, we can add them to our list and address them in another time, either in our Hello Monday weekly articles that we send every week, or in the LinkedIn lives.
Yeah, so and I like what you said, though. I like the fact that you're sort of comparing it to the 4-day work week, because they're two very different models potentially. It depends on your organisation. Two very different models. One is kind of, we're going to formally squash the week. And again, it comes back to permission, doesn't it? Because I know you're not a fan of it, and I'm not a huge fan of it, but I kind of defended it in our last LinkedIn Live, and that's because it formalizes something. And this is the same. I have slight panic attacks about the idea of going, hey, we're now working a full, 7 till 7, and I know some of the places I've worked in the past, there'd be a lot of pushback on that. But again, it's about formalizing the fact that it's okay to work at those times, and certainly a few of the companies that have done this have started to notice that time and presence issue that you spoke about at the beginning of this session starts to dissipate, because no one is expected to be around all the time from 7 to 7. It suddenly becomes a thing that there aren't hours in which you absolutely have to be at your computer or on the end of WhatsApp or whatever, because everyone just accepts that's the case. So it potentially just chills everyone out for the whole of that sort of 12-hour window, if that's what you're doing, 12 hours.
Exactly, and it is good to compare that. I'm actually because we did talk about it in our last LinkedIn Live. So what I'm doing, or at least what I'm trying to do right now, is to put this in the comments, the link to that last LinkedIn Live. So, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I also put the link on YouTube after the show.
Great.
So make sure to let me, in the meantime, do that here. There we go.
Done.
In the meantime, Trevor, what do you think are the main pitfalls, or what concerns do you think HR people might have when we talk about moving to this kind of formalized model in organizations?
Yeah, so isn't it strange that I end up being the voice of HR between the two of us, which is an interesting one. I mean, I just, having been in organisations that are tentative to do anything like this, or if it's not just tentative, they decided not to do it. I know that some of the concerns are, isn't that just kind of making a longer working day? And of course, there are issues. So, for those of us who've worked for senior leaders who have this sense that as soon as they say something, they email it or they message you, Slack or whatever, that you have to respond immediately, you will then effectively end up working whatever hours they work. My slight counter to that, because this is kind of what ties in with the longer hours thing, this expectation that you need to work these longer hours, is that was probably the case anyway. And those leaders typically do work longer hours. There's a different conversation to be had with them, and I've seen there was a real upsurge actually, particularly during lockdown, where we had these leaders who were working very unusual hours. Maybe they were doing childcare or they were doing homeschooling, whatever. And there was this significant increase in people putting things on at the end of their messages as part of their signature saying, you don't have to respond just because I've sent it at this time. That doesn't mean I expect you to work at this time. And I think a culture, it's not necessarily about having that in your signature, but a culture that sets the expectation that leaders, just because they're important, and maybe they're not important, maybe they just have a position, but leaders, because they're important, you don't expect an immediate response. So often the flatter the organization, the less likely they are to feel that. That kind of then links with peer pressure. So peer pressure is just, again, this idea that where you get this kind of, we've seen it again in other organizations, you get this kind of competition about who's working the most hours. And now maybe if you've got a lot of your work is office-based, you've now got an office that's open from 7 to 7, and this kind of implicit sense that you have to be there. So that is a challenge, and again, really bad for well-being, really bad for inclusion, because some people's personal circumstances just don't allow them to be. So they'll be competing against people whose personal circumstances do allow them to be there all that time.
Yeah, and what we see, in the Netherlands, we see something that happens a lot is that there's always people starting at 7. Yeah. And we call it the terror of the morning people, because I have several people that, like me, are not early starters. And when you would come in at 9 or 9:30 and even 10, and then there's the colleague sitting there for 7, so they're like 2-3 hours already, and they would just start, you go in, you say, good afternoon. And it is one of the things, it might be a joke, or and because first of all, those people would go home at 4, most likely, if they would stick to the 8-hour schedule, and then they don't see that you are still there as the only person till 6 or till 7.
Exactly.
And second of all, it's and this is something that I've learned a lot from in the book about freedom at work, Why Work Sucks and How to Fix It. And this is about, if you start to give this freedom and flexibility at work, those jokes, they are very representative of the culture that you're in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
especially as leaders, and it might be feeling as a joke, but you are setting the tone and you are giving up a very clear message that it is not acceptable for people to start at 10. And so if you move to this model and you will want to do it in a respectful way, acknowledging that everybody is having their own rhythm and their own hours and their own personal life, it's something that you should be very much aware in, even on team level, and that connects back to the peer pressure and the longer hours as well.
Yeah, there's a big bit of culture here, isn't there?
Exactly.
And I think the collaboration piece is kind of obvious, and people have, again, suffered during lockdown. They understand this, which is that you might struggle to get overlapping hours. And that's a very real issue. And again, it depends on the nature of your work. It depends on the nature of your business. But you gave yourself as an example. You don't like getting up particularly. You're not an early morning person. I am, and we're in different time zones. So like actually making that work can be quite difficult, but we are able to collaborate. And admittedly, it's only two of us. But this is where we need to be really brutally honest with ourselves. And we come back to this a few times, and we'll talk about the guidance in a minute, where you've got to be really brutally honest about why are you coming together? What is the purpose? Be really clear on it, because actually the vast majority of teams don't necessarily have to overlap that much in order to collaborate. And people confuse sharing information with collaboration. I think if you can dissect those two things and recognize one is very much a live activity, you're really collaborating, you're bouncing off one another, you're co-creating, and the other one is information sharing, you'll then be able to work out how to collaborate even with limited overlap in hours.
Exactly. And I think this is one of the most important things that we will see over the next years is people going to asynchronous working. So emails by nature are asynchronous. It means that there must be an acceptable time slot, and it's usually between 24 or 48 hours that you would expect somebody to answer an email. Especially, working your people you're working closely with. So it means that if you get by the end of the day or like after your working hours, an email comes in, you can just leave it to the next day. If your boss, if there's an urgent question, and I really like the concept of how to work with me. It's kind of a document that you can share with your direct colleagues and peers, where you say, okay, I'm usually I'm an early starter. I like to work on some deliverables in the early morning without being disturbed, and in the afternoon I'm more available for calls and collaboration, and I'll be coming back and forth with emails and new ideas. And if I'm logging off, I log off everything. I don't have email on my phone, but if you really need me, just ping me on Slack or send me a message on WhatsApp, and I'll just give me a call so I can, if it's a quick thing that is urgent, it's that urgent that it can't wait. So make that difference between synchronous working, asynchronous working, and be honest, a lot of things just can wait.
Yeah, and I would just say I think your point about like the how to work with me documents, I recommend them virtually all the time. I mean, particularly a lot of the time during lockdown with hybrid working, that sort of stuff. 100%, it's such a useful thing to do, and it then automatically kind of scales up into team agreements, which also can really make life an awful lot more easy. Rather than just going, well, this is how the company works. A lot of the time, that is kind of a lazy way of inheriting how your team works, but actually owning and talking about how each person interacts and likes to be interacted with, and then coming up with something that works a team agreement can really get rid of a lot of the issues. And you then set your own little subculture.
Exactly. Yeah, I like it. And I think we made it, as you say, we made it work kind of very naturally. It's just two people. But so let's have a look at, what could be, what are the most important conditions to be met. It basically goes for all models basically goes for all knowledge work to be successful. It needs to be results driven. So one of the things that we noticed with the implementation of the new way of working, and this has actually become the base of my studies and the foundation of Hello Monday Club itself, is that companies were implementing the new way of working, and this is 15 years ago, so people could have that flexibility. They could be working from home. They could come up to the office in different hours. But what companies failed to do was move to really autonomous and results-driven working structures. And that led to problems. I've seen it quite a lot of times. And also the goals of the whole concept were not met because that's the core of the collaboration, moving to results-driven organization was not done. That is related, of course, to trust and empowered employees. Also, what I found in my studies when I focused in my master thesis about the most effective management style for knowledge work is autonomy is one of the key questions. And to do that, this is results-driven trust and empowering your employees are the three key things. And you can go to extended business hours. You can stay in your 9 to 5, 5 days. You go to 32 hours. These are the conditions that you need to be working on in your organization to make any of these organizations successful. What do you?
And I would add like an extra layer around results driven, because there are organizations that consider to be very results driven, but what they do is they tend to chase short-term targets, or they tend to chase just numerical targets. And really for us, what we've seen work well, and again, it tends to happen more on a team level, but it can spread out across an organization, can be an organizational stance, is become focused on the outcome. So, and often there will be a more numeric target built into that, or sometimes it will be because they measure exactly the right thing. But what you don't want to do is chase a result that isn't meaningful. It's far better to chase an outcome that's meaningful and refer back to metrics to help you understand if you're achieving that outcome. A lot of leaders, managers, and so forth need a lot of coaching to really shift that mindset. But when they do, they naturally then end up with a more empowered and liberated team, and that's really a prerequisite for this model in particular, also for the 4-day week, but certainly for this model, it won't work without that kind of sense of genuine empowerment.
Yeah, and that empowering is empowering your employees, and it sounds a little bit like like this kind of fashionable word, empowering your employees. But what we're really talking about is, and it is so important, is to make sure that your employees learn new skills and they feel, as you say, get rid of that guilt and feel that permission, but also step in that place of, I am taking care of myself. I'm in charge of my own well-being. I'm in charge of my results, and I'm in charge of the energy that I'm bringing to my organization. So it's not something, the organization is not in charge of culture. Employees are in charge of culture. Employees are in charge of their own well-being. Because an organization cannot do that, and that is a mindset shift. That if you can make that in your organization for the next few years, you can say people stepping up and say, "Listen, I'm just taking care of myself right now. I'm just gonna unplug for the rest of the afternoon. If it's really urgent, I'm a phone call away, but I expect everything. I just, this is going to be some time for me, without feeling guilty, without feeling that things are, going to be falling apart or
absolutely
being problems. So there's a lot of underlying concepts and mindsets and paradigms about work that need to be addressed. It is a long way. People always saying our managers cannot let go of control, and people have trust issues, and there's dinosaurs in the organization. We have to understand that in all of these models, we have been programmed in a certain way, and that is that we cannot trust employees, that employees are, by nature have a different agenda than we have. And this is a factory mindset. It's connected to the Marxist model, the Fordism, the Taylorism model. And it is no longer valid when we talk about knowledge work, because knowledge workers are not selling their time and their labor, they're selling their knowledge and their skills. And they basically all have the same agendas. So if you can align that, then you will be, it's the key for your success and for implementing all of those models. And even I dare to say that if you manage to do that, those models, they will not even, you don't even have to talk about them anymore, because they will figure themselves.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're really right. Yeah. And I look forward to seeing a lot more organizations over the coming years embrace, as you say, a kind of employee-led culture, which I've seen a lot of resistance to in the past, with leaders saying we define the culture. And the reality is you don't anyway. So you may as well embrace that fact and actually work with your employees to work out what culture is going to be more effective.
Great. Yes. Okay, this is the end for our LinkedIn Live today. So we are here live every week on a Thursday at 1 p.m. UK time. So we have quite a lot of time zones that people can just check in. These are informal chats. Trevor and me have been doing this for probably 2 years, having back and forth weekly calls, talking about the future of work, and we decided to get others involved in the conversation. So if you see this in the replay, make sure to go to our page, Hello Monday Club on LinkedIn, find our next events, subscribe to our, and let me see, you can subscribe here on the website as well, so you can get the invite in your mailbox. It's informal. We would love to have people share their ideas, questions, and challenges like we did today. We actually addressed a question of one of our viewers. We hope we answered it, but we're also ready to, always willing and able to answer new questions. So put them on the chat, put them in the comments, send us an email, and we'll see you all next week.
Yeah.
Thank
See you next week.
Trevor.
Take care. Thanks, Angelique.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.